How weapon damage is calculated in the Division 2 is a little like President Biden's debate answers.
Everything we have to do with
I like turtles.
So in this video I'm going to tell you in clear and simple terms exactly how damage works, and I'm going to do it in only 3 minutes. And to do this properly I need a bucket.
Gaston, a bucket for monsieur.
Several of them actually, because the way that damage works in the Division 2 is that each type of damage goes into a bucket, and these buckets are multiplied together to calculate the per shot damage. The key damage modifier buckets are weapon damage, which comes primarily from weapons and gear, total weapon damage, which comes from talents, critical hit damage and headshot damage, which comes from attributes on gear, damage to targets out of cover, damage to armor, damage to health, all of which come from attributes on gear, and amplified damage, which comes from talents. To maximize damage, we want to spread our multipliers across as many buckets as we can. Let me use a simple example to illustrate. Let's assume we have 158% weapon damage, 18% damage to targets out of cover, 21% damage to health, and 176% critical hit damage, and no active talents on our build. Like this one here. The non-critical damage per shot to a red bar enemy would be the base damage of our weapon multiplied by 1 plus the weapon damage percentage times 1 plus the damage to targets out of cover percentage times 1 plus the damage to health percentage. And for a crit it would be the same, but also multiplied by 1 plus the critical hit damage percentage. But what is the base damage of our weapon? In their wisdom, Massive decided that the weapon damage shown on the inventory screen would not be the base damage, because clearly that would be far too useful. But if you have the blueprint for a weapon, then the base damage is actually shown at the crafting bench, like here for the St. Elmo's. But don't despair if you don't have the blueprint, because the weapon damage shown in the inventory is actually the base damage multiplied by 1 plus the weapon damage percentage of the build, excluding any talents. We can check this for the St. Elmo's in the build. There we go. So going back to our calculation, and the non-critical damage per body shot would be 162.8 thousand. And for critical hit, the damage per body shot will be 449.3 thousand, which checks out in the range. Back to my simple example then. If we had 2 talents we could use on our build, one of which added 10% weapon damage and one which added 10% total weapon damage, which would you use? But the first one, the new non-critical hit damage per body shot, would be 169.1 thousand, and for the second one 179.1 thousand. So if you have the choice between adding 10% to one of your existing damage buckets or adding 10% to a whole new bucket, you now know which to choose. There was one final thing to layer in, which is that each source of amplified damage has its own bucket, which is why multiple sources of amplified damage can be so good. The full damage calculation algorithm, including all of the buckets, is now on screen. With this information you can calculate how much damage a build will do, but in order to create the best weapon damage build you need to know which are the best talents, which you can find out in this video here, where I rank each of them.